Good afternoon. Hello, everyone. I'm Deborah Price, a member of the Board of Trustees of Columbus Metropolitan Club and a partner at Ice Miller Law Firm. It's great to see you all here today. All right, today's forum, Retail Reality, the story that may surprise you. According to the U.S. Census, retail sales hit a record $6 trillion in 2018 and are increasing at a healthy rate of about 3% per year. At the same time, scenes of retail bankruptcies, store closings, vacant malls are all too familiar to us, with all this being credited to the growth in e-commerce. So let's turn to our experts to explore what's happening. But before we get to them, I want to tell you that today's event was sponsored by Casto and the Dispatch Media Group. Won't you please help me thank them? All right, now turning to our experts to help us explore what's happening, please welcome author and retired marketing professor Roger Blackwell. Executive Vice President of WD Partners, Lee Peterson. Welcome, Lee. Founder and Chief Creative Officers at Jenny's Splendid Ice Creams, Jenny Britton-Bauer. And our host, journalist at the Columbus Dispatch, Mark Williams. Roger will start with opening remarks, and then Mark will lead the conversation. Roger, the floor is yours.
Go, Roger.
Oh, okay. I thought I'd just stay here. Is that okay? Retailing is not extinct. It's not an endangered species even. It's evolving according to very well-established theories. Maybe you've seen the IH study, which shows that 5 chains are opening for every retailer that's closing. And that's this year's data. Last year was 3.7, so it's actually getting better each year. I'll let Mark tell you why he writes stories about closing stores but not opening stores. Well-managed, innovative retailers are replacing poorly managed, complacent firms. Does anybody remember Farrell's Ice Cream up at Graceland? It's no longer there, but has anybody heard of some new ice cream stores?
I love Farrell's.
Have a birthday party there, maybe? Anybody remember Arthur Treacher's Fish and Chips? It started right here in Ohio. It's gone now. I think they have 7 stores in New York. Anybody remember the Union? Okay. It's gone. It was what's called a specialty retailer, a specialty department store. Did you see the report from Target yesterday, which is a specialty discount type of retailer? Their sales, their digital comps are up, I think it was 37% this year. And if you follow their stock, it was over 100 this morning.
Roger, before you go on, just explain to the audience what you're talking about with comps.
Oh, comp store sales. Same thing compared to last year. You know, if you add new stores and your sales go up, yeah, that's good. But if you have the same number of stores and then compare them to the stores that you had last year, that's called comp. And now the new comp digital, which is why Target's up 37% in their digital sales compared to last year. And incidentally,
well, and before you go on, Roger,
yeah.
I mean, if a retailer does even 2 or 3% increase in comps, that's pretty good. But when you're doing something like that, then obviously that's like this.
Yeah, and
Don't forget that's e-com.
That's e-com, right. Yes. And Nordstrom's does 40% of their business now on e-com. And my wife's here, so I'm pretty sure that's true, actually. But the whole point is well-managed, innovative stores replace poorly managed, complacent stores, and you can predict which ones will be which. If you go to Target today, why are they doing so well? Have you seen their pet department? How many here have pets here? How many spend any money on those pets? Target's got that. And what was Target's original name? Marshall Field. Yeah. Marshall Field's gone, but not gone. Target has been the innovative replacement for that. Kohl's was an old traditional department store like many others, and they're doing pretty well, actually. Not quite as well as Target, but doing well. Why? Because, A, they changed from service in the store. You used to pay at the cash register like traditional department stores used to do it. And now you check out, and that's much more efficient. They've become more efficient. And a lot of people say, well, the old retailers, it's not like what it was. But actually, Walmart, one of my friends said, nobody goes to Walmart anymore. The checkout lines are too long. People do go to Walmart, if you've seen. And they actually are using efficiency at the checkout with letting machines check people out in a lot of the cases. And one of the reasons is because of a guy who started at minimum wage. Now, what would a person who started at minimum wage 27 years ago at Walmart, he worked in the distribution center, what would he be making today, do you think? His name is Doug McMillan, I might tell you. He started minimum wage, now he makes $20 million a year. But I should tell you, he got an MBA and an undergraduate degree along the way. Do you see why some retailers win and some lose? A lot of people say, well, I miss somebody like Chi-Chi's. Remember Chi-Chi's? Oh, yeah. How about Burger Chef? How many remember Burger Chef? Anybody remember that? Did you know they were the second largest retail chain in America? They had 1,200 stores when McDonald's had 1,600 stores. Not that much difference. Burger Chef's gone. McDonald's has 37,000 stores now. And that's globally. Much of that growth came because of a guy by the name of Larry Light, who was their global VP of marketing, 37,000. Would you like to guess where he got his degree in consumer behavior? Larry Light was the first doctoral student in consumer behavior at Ohio State. And Chi-Chi's and Steak and Ale and Arthur Treacher's, they're gone, but Cameron Mitchell is doing quite well, and so is Piata. And Columbus is the maternity ward of restaurant chains, actually. Jenny's is not a restaurant chain, but it's in the same vein. And what's the oldest chain of restaurants in America? 1921 it started. White Castle, yes. Are they still around? How many of you actually had a slider when you're sober? No, I mean... But I think it's fourth generation. Is at least the fourth generation or something like that now? They're doing very well. And in fact, I had an Impossible slider there not too long ago. And one time I went in and asked for it, and they couldn't give it to me. You know why? Sold out. But she has introduced waffles imported from Belgium and rings. Who doesn't like rings? These are chicken rings, but Impossible sliders and things like innovative people, and it all is predictable based upon theories of marketing and consumer behavior and retailing. The most famous person in marketing once was Theodore Beckman. Did anybody recognize that name here? He was an immigrant to the U.S. from Russia, and he and his brother became chicken pluckers at the old Central Market. And his brother never left as a chicken plucker. But Ted Beckman got an undergraduate degree at Ohio State and then got a PhD in economics and wrote the first major textbook on marketing called Principles of Marketing. And he went on to write 20 books and developed many of the theories that explain what's happening right now. Most important one was functional shiftability. That's how you understand what's happening in retailing. And two of his students were Alton Doody, is that name right? He had a wife who was a pretty good cook. And the president of Carrefour, one of the biggest retailers in the world, came to listen to Alton and had a dinner that Sue prepared in their home. And they said, you should start a restaurant. And she did, named Lindy's, of course, and just recently departed, wonderful woman. And if you look at the ones that evolve, they understand it. The other student, besides Alton Doody, was Bill Davidson. And they were professors and wrote the first definitive textbook on retailing. And as a result of that, they finally left the university and started a consulting firm almost as good as WD Partners, I'm sure.
No.
People from all over the world came here to get retailing knowledge from Davidson and Duty at Managed Horizons, which is having its 50th anniversary this weekend at a local hotel, which I won't name. But in it, they talked about the wheel of retailing in their book, which was actually invented in 1931. And if you studied the wheel of retailing, you know which direction it's going to roll next. And if you study consumer behavior, you know how fast it's going to roll. And it has rolled in very predictable fashions. If you look at retailers, a lot of them are prospering. A lot of people say, oh, they're dying. The big ones are dying. I don't know, have you been to Best Buy lately? Or Home Depot lately? Or Costco? Costco does $1,000 per square foot in retailing. That's about 3 times what the average retailer does. And there's a little firm called Lululemon that does $1,500 a square foot in their stores. And there's a phone company that runs Apple stores, which does $5,000 per square foot. No, it all depends on what kind of management you have. And some people have well-managed along the lines of predictable theories. One of those theories was the polarity of retailing. Historically, if you study retailing, you understand that the average is like a normal distribution, and that most of the stores in the middle had average prices, average assortment of goods, and average appeal. And they've been replaced with a polarity of retailing. At one end is the high efficiency, very price effective retailers, like Walmart, of course, and like DSW, and what's one of the fastest growing retailers in the world? A lot of people say, oh, Amazon. It is, but that's only one of the A's that Walmart faces. The other one starts with A also. What's that retailer? That's opening more new stores, probably more, the largest grocery store chain in the world. Aldi, of course, yeah. Yeah, and Walmart has got to deal with A, Amazon, and A, Aldi. And Amazon is opening retail stores now, staffed with no one to interact with consumers. And they say that's new. I mean, Macy's and Sears have been doing that for years.
Exactly right.
But 2 of Beckman's students were Bill Davidson and Alton Doody, and one of his other PhD students was Arthur Coleman. Anybody knew Art or C. Coleman here? They're wonderful, wonderful people. And Art Coleman taught these same theories from Beckman on functional shiftability. He had a student in his class, and I've heard Art say he didn't know that student at the time, but the student attributes much of his success to Art Coleman and these theories. The student opened a store in the Kingsdale. What was that student's name? Yeah, you might think of it later.
I know the guy.
Wexner did pretty well just using theory that he learned, because it's totally predictable. And people go into retailing without knowing theory. That's like saying, let's send a person to the moon or Mars, and I don't care about laws of theories of physics, because some people don't think it's practical to be theoretical. My last book has 11 theories in it that explain where retailing and marketing will go, and my publisher insisted, I won't say forced me, to change the word theory to principles, because he said people are turned off by theory. So it's got 11 principles. But if you read it, you recognize they're really theories. And don't let the publisher know that I said that. But anyway, lots of retailers are prospering. Eddie Lambert may know a lot about real estate, but he didn't understand retailing. So goodbye Sears, goodbye Montgomery Ward, goodbye the people who don't know theory. There is nothing so practical as good theory. And retailing is doing well. As Judge Price said, it's retailing is now growing almost twice, not quite, 3.5% compared to 2%, almost twice as fast as the economy as a whole. So what's the problem? You might think it's an apocalypse, right?
Can I go? Well, one of the things I think, first of all, there is no retail apocalypse. There isn't. If you look at overall retail sales, as Roger alluded to, I mean, they're up, and they have been up, like consistently up. But I think what we failed to mention, and kind of the 900-pound gorilla in the room, is online sales have proliferated to the extent that they've actually exacerbated the demise of the average retailer, or the medium retailer, as you call them.
The poorly managed ones.
So if you're poorly managed and you don't believe in innovation and you're doing things the way that you have been doing them, for the past 50 years, then you're going to go out of business now. And somebody who has a better idea, whether it's Silicon Valley or whether it's, the short north, somebody comes up with an idea, they don't need a platform to expand. They have a platform right here to expand to the world globally. So I think that like online proliferation has changed the face of retail forever. And we have an expression at WD Partners where we say, everybody always asks, what's the future of physical retail, stores? And I always say smaller, better. So fewer stores, like Jenny's, yeah, smaller and better. But fewer stores that could do showrooming, which is basically you scan things with your phone and go pick it up in the back, or have it shipped to your house. So smaller stores, and you don't need. I mean, Abercrombie, for example, and I hope there's not too many people here from Abercrombie, but
not as many as there used to be.
That's right. Abercrombie, to have 40 or 50 stores would be great. I think they'd be a great company, and the rest of the business online. And you can do that now. So you can have a flagship store and still do, hundreds of millions of dollars worth of business because of online.
Well, and delivery. I mean, we're looking at just having the space the size of a garage in San Francisco, but serving a pretty big community just with delivery. Wherever you're at, in a park or walking down the street, we can just meet you with ice cream and you can have that moment. The same is true for apparel. I mean, I've, in some of the bigger cities, often found myself without the right outfit and just call up somebody to bring me something. So it's kind of interesting how those are actually meeting, as
And
well.
I bought Jenny's ice cream on Amazon. I don't know whether you're still selling it or not.
I mean, I buy it on Amazon.
Oh, good.
I gotta test it.
I send it as gifts to people.
Or just straight through our website. I mean, we're working on a platform which will allow you to just go right there, and we'll deliver it wherever you're at.
And most of the things that are sold on Amazon, things that Amazon sells, or things they sell for other retailers. Mostly other retailers. It's over half.
Third party, yeah. So one of the interesting things about Amazon that not a lot of people talk about, take AWS out of there, their revenues, just straight up revenues, and a lot of us, I think about half of it is third party revenue, have increased over $100 billion in the last 3 years. $100 billion. I remember when I worked for The Limited and we hit $5 billion, I thought, we were going to go through the ceiling with $5 billion. $100 billion in 3 years.
And really what has happened is many of those retailers have grown organically, and some of them have been able to buy other firms that were not so good. And that's what happens. Good firms get to buy bad firms. And so if we have any bad firms out there, you look for some of the good firms around and you'll be able to sell them to them, probably, at a bargain price.
Hey, Jenny.
And Jenny, and that's how Jenny makes so much money, is because she sells it so cheap.
I don't know how to respond to that.
Now, good retailers can charge premium prices. It's just like if you have somebody who paints your house or does your plumbing or anything else. If they do good service, you don't quibble about price very much. You quibble about, oh, I really appreciate your good service. Can we get you back to take care of us? And it's the same way with retailers. Maybe you've read about Waterstones, just bought Barnes & Noble. Yeah. Waterstones took little independent bookstores that were dying in Britain and have made them now 25% of all the book sales. Real competition to Amazon. And they just bought Barnes & Noble. And if they revolutionize and give an experience, that's part of the charm of Jenny's, is it's the experience there. And it'll be interesting to see if they can do that in the U.S., what they did in Britain, because they rejuvenated the bookstore business, which you can get it on Amazon, but
I was going to ask a question or two.
Probably not Barnes and Noble.
Because this could go on forever. Just
Yeah.
so you know.
Well, and unlike these guys, I'm much more negative on retailing, and I've got a whole list of data that I was going to read to you, but it's already getting late. So Jenny, one of the things I wanted to ask you is what works for you to bring people to your stores?
I mean, I think that we think of our company as a community, of course. I mean, every company is a community, but we want to have that sort of, we want to all be united by our values. And so I do think that those sort of spread, you know, I mean, we obviously have, online presence. We started our website in 2004. So when we open in LA, we do that because we know we're selling ice cream in LA. We started, selling in grocery there. So we can also track where people are. But I do think that a lot of times it starts not in Columbus, but outside of Columbus online somewhere, and they've reached us there, and then we're working, we think of even like our Instagram or whatever is platform that we're on as a service platform, and so we can make a connection that way. But I think that what ultimately what brings people into the stores is not us and not the amazing ice cream that we make as a community of makers, growers, and producers and all of that stuff, and it's expensive to do beautiful things. But you're not really there for that. You're there to get to know somebody else better, and we know that really well. I know that because I worked for 10 years at the North Market, behind the counter, making all the ice creams and listening to how people use those, and interact with the ice creams. And we know that people come to Jenny's because they have somebody that they're interested in with them, and our ice creams can help maybe spark a conversation or give you that moment of sort of fun, and maybe you end up with salty caramel anyway, but you tasted the beet ice cream. But when you sit down, you have 5 minutes of conversation about that, and then it moves into something else. And which is why also people get married in our stores and engaged in our stores. I mean, these meaningful connections that we're creating there. And I think that ultimately is
And
what
if
you
there's lines outside, people must say, there must be something good inside, right?
Well, and I will tell you, because I think this is another thing, element of retail now is that sort of almost that culture, the alignment with our culture. It's different than the old or style of branding, that external branding where you would wear a label on you and then you were united with another, with a tribe or something. I think people want that in person now. So you get to something like Jenny's or wherever you're going, and it's a part of that thing of like, when you're standing in line, you know that everybody in line, we all kind of share this belief, whatever it is. I mean, this flavor, this thing that we all kind of agree on. I mean, I know that that's the same at Jenny's and many of the other places that I will make treks to. It's like you get there and it's like you just know that I can start a conversation with whoever's in line with me and we can talk about. We have stuff in common, and there's something to that as well. I think right now with really all of these retailers that we've just
It's
spoken
worked
about.
for Starbucks pretty well,
Very
actually.
well.
Jenny, one of the things that when we were talking yesterday in preparation for this is you were talking about constant testing and refining. What is it that you're exactly looking for?
Well, I think I was explaining that because that's if I have any expertise on this, it's boots on the ground. And that's where it comes from me. It's just test and learn constantly. We're always putting out various, obviously, flavors, but also what should the menu look like, and how many things do we have on the menu, and what about merchandising and other things we can offer, and how should the line flow, and we're constantly doing that. I don't know if you've noticed, but if you've been in the Short North store in the last 2 years, we've changed the flow a couple of times. We've done a few different things, but constantly thinking about how can we serve our community better in that way. But that's, and so we're just in a constant way of doing that, but yearly. We'll try, whatever we launch in March, you're stuck with it for a season. And then we go back and redo that in the fall.
And you always have new flavors from time to time.
Every month or so.
I sort of like the salty pecan or
Did you try
bourbon,
the Tyler
pecan.
flavor?
I haven't tried that yet. That's good. And the experience in the store, have you noticed at Target, not only pet supplies has expanded, so's toys. Now, why would Target expand the area of toys? I mean, nothing's happened in the market except Toys R Us went bankrupt.
We have nowhere else to buy them.
And kids can play with the toys there and see them and so forth. It's a little more difficult to do online.
Sorry for jumping in. Jenny alluded to this, but I think this is the way of the future for retailers. I don't know if you could say, fortunately, we've worked with Amazon, but I think, you learn a lot from working with anybody. And we have to get in the mode, like Jenny's, retailers have to get in the mode of failing fast. Try something, didn't work, go ahead. And I always think about you remember the Amazon Fire phone? If you even remember it, I mean, they advertise that thing on TV like crazy, and they're talking about their phone and their TV and all this stuff, and you're thinking, oh my God, they're getting in the phone business. And then they stopped. They said, it didn't work, we're ending it. Okay, what are we doing next? We're going to do a Go Fresh store, we're going to do a bookstore, we're going to do the 4-star store, which if you haven't been in one of those is really kind of an amazing experience. But I think the idea is, just like you're saying, like what's next? What do I think of next while everything's working? Don't wait for it to start to slow down, just start to move quick and test things. And that's why now you see retailers trying crazy things, I think, and you think, boy, that's really crazy that Kohl's has a restaurant, or, Restoration Hardware has the best restaurant in New York City. I don't think that's crazy at all. And the days of brand permission, do you have permission to create a set of keys for us or whatever? Those days are gone. I think you can take your brand, try new things, and see where the people that love your brand, like yours, will take it.
At the same time, you have to be really focused. So that's this weird thing. I mean, Jenny's will never do lunch. You know what I mean? We'll never have sit-down service. I mean, there are certain things, focus is so much a part of it. And yet at the same time, always trying.
Can I write
new
that
things.
down? That you'll never have lunch?
You'll never have lunch at a den. Well, no, I mean, you can have ice cream for lunch, which is what we do all the time. That's fine.
Who needs anything else, right? Milkshakes, too.
But these are things that these are things that have come up. You know what I mean? These are the sort of ferals or the older style, but also things that we've thought about. Like what other things do people want from us? And we know that people come to Jenny's because, like I said, they want to get to know somebody else better. It's this moment. But it's not bigger than that. It's not more than that right now. I mean, there's a lot we can do within that.
Okay, we will get to audience questions here in just a minute. But I want to cover one more thing before we go into that part of the program. Tuttle Mall recently has putting in a thing called Experience 75. It almost sounds like a little bit of an indoor amusement park, but arcades, go-kart rides, laser tag, the whole bit, obviously taking up space that was once occupied by some of the big box retailers that Roger alludes to that were not managed well. Is this our mall space? Obviously, we're way over malled in this country and still continue to be. Amazon's now using malls as distribution centers. Is this a possibility for a way to reuse these malls?
Interesting you should say that. We just did a study, a national study, 3,500 people. I'm looking at somebody that works with us, Kenny. And we gave them choices. We gave 3,000 some people choices, like, okay, your Sears or your big box store goes out. What would you like to see in place of that? And, give us your top 3, et cetera, et cetera. And of the top 5 that we got back, 3 were food. So, not a food court, but a food hall. And we would always show a picture. We showed a food hall in Copenhagen, which I don't know if you've been there, but it's fabulous. And basically they pull food trucks into this place and they switch every day and that type of thing. People went crazy for that. Farmers markets, grocery stores. So I think that.
You mean there's a market for food trucks?
I think there's a general underappreciation of what food can do for the empty spaces in retail
And
that are
empty
coming
stomachs, too. Right.
Yeah, well, and mixed tenants that include food.
What happened to Tuttle? Easton and Polaris.
Online shopping.
I get worried when we look at it. I mean, I love the food halls and the food markets, and Ponce City Market in Atlanta is fantastic. And
Yeah.
we have a store at Krog Street Market, which is one of our busiest stores, and it's our. Yep, it's about 300 square feet, and it's just got a line all the time, and it's an amazing indoor sort of public market, almost like our North Market, except that they are like James Beard award-winning chefs there. So I feel like I get nervous when it's like, okay, here's the formula, because then if you end up with the bagged salad, sort of people trying to be farm to table, but it's versus like at Ponce City Market, it's phenomenal food, and so then they have gathering space and all retail and all this different stuff, and it's fun to just go hang out there. But if it was, if it's just formulaic, like, okay, we need this, this, and this, check the boxes, but the chefs aren't as high quality, then I feel like that
I agree with you.
doesn't help us.
I think at the end of the day, if developers are going to turn to food, they have to be as creative as the food people are.
And
Yeah.
high quality.
I was working with a church youth group one time, and they said, "What's the secret to get youth to the church?" And the answer is food. Pizza, ice cream, that's the way to get them there. And the experience, it's going to be interesting to see what this British firm that has bought Barnes & Noble does, because every one of those stores is individualized to the local community with local appeal and local books and so forth. We have Loft and some sort of examples of that here, but complacent management dies. Innovative management has a chance to be very successful.
Okay. All right, so it's now our time to take audience questions. Please state your name and ask your question, and of course, you know the rules about editorial comments and that kind of thing. So let's get started with the first question.
Yes, my name is Warren Fishman, and this question's for Jenny. I'm a regular patron of Jenny's, and what I notice is that, and I love ice cream, so I've been to other places, and there's nothing worse than an ice cream store with the help having a bad attitude. Ice cream should be happy. And what I notice about Jenny's is you seem to attract really good people, which everybody talks about today is so hard to do. And I mean, they've all got each, I always try the new flavors, they've got each flavor memorized, what's in it, where you got it, and they always have a smile on their face, and they've just got a great attitude, which is a great culture. And I wonder how you accomplish that.
Well, that's true here in Columbus, but the great thing, the most wonderful thing is that it's also true in LA, or Charleston or Atlanta. When you walk into a Jenny's store, there's this, I don't know, this culture that we have that's really interested in what we do and in our customers. I think that it comes from, I mean, obviously we have to have good training. And I will say that we've been at a place in our company where we didn't have a great team, and it was constantly, it was very tough. And once you start to get it right, it starts to attract, and then it becomes your culture, and then it sort of becomes this sort of wheel that keeps turning. Yeah, it's a weird thing. We don't, young people don't get jobs anymore the same way that they used to, and I'm really on a tear to try to change that, because I feel that that's the young people that work in our company, and that's in the last 20 years, everyone I've ever worked with have been so amazing, and they learn so much about themselves. And I was, coming from my first job when I was 15. It's an important part of your life, and so there's that, and we find people in the communities that we're in, but once we do, they want to learn everything. We almost can't teach them enough. I mean, they get tested, they love it. They have to get 100% before they can even get onto the front line. That's not demanded from me. That comes from them. They want to be experts. They want to feel like when they come into work, this is their professional job, and it's really cool. So I won't say that we don't do a lot of work. We do a lot, but we're not. We don't know. I mean, it's almost like it becomes a self-sustaining thing that they want it just as much as we do too.
Customers, as Southwest Airlines says, shouldn't be number one.
Oh yeah, that's true.
Employees should be number one, because if they're number one employees, they'll take care of the customers so well they'll keep coming back.
I also will say that I think that I think now there's not a divide between back of the house and front of the house, and I think that any business, I've used the restaurant example, we know what our companies stand for, and that's important in this generation. And so for the people who work on our front line, the ambassadors in our stores, to know who we are and what we stand for, that means something to them that they want to represent, and that's really, really of massive importance, I think, in our company and for them.
Okay, next question.
This is also a question for Jenny. I know recently speaking to LA and your company culture, you recently collaborated with Tyler, the Creator. He had his own flavor created. He's from Los Angeles. I'm also from California, is why I knew the relevance. My question is, was there like a very strict process that you and your team went through to select somebody who's not in ice cream? He's not even in food retailing. He's a musician, and why you chose to collaborate with him, and if you were concerned at all by anything that he might do that might be controversial, that might affect your culture and the way the world views your company.
Yeah, Tyler is it's really cool, because Tyler and I are buddies. We're like very similar thinkers, but from very, very different places and perspectives. He reached out to us. He's a fan. He rides his bike to our store like once a day, and he's amazing. So he reached out to us.
That's the way to eat ice cream all the time.
But he loves what we do. He read everything in our stores and just fell in love with our company, and that's kind of how that happened. But I do like working with people not in food. So right now we have a few people that we're looking at to work with for next year, and of course Tyler, and we'll keep going with a couple things. But I think these partnerships are super fun and very artistic. And there wasn't a strict, the one working with Tyler, who, if anybody knows Tyler, I mean, he's just a very, I don't know, creative guy. And anyway, the more restrictions you put on him, the less interested he is. And that's kind of how I am too, so that's great. So we didn't have any, really. And it worked out great.
Okay, next question.
I'm Carol McGuire. I want to thank all of you for being here today. I think that the changing face of consumer consumption is absolutely fascinating. One of the areas that I haven't heard you mention much about that I've seen significant growth is subscriptions. There are things like BarkBox, Stitch Fit, if all of you probably in here have seen some of these, and on and on and on, where consumers can simply sign up for and receive whatever it is that they have an interest in on a monthly basis or a weekly basis or whatever. Jenny, I suspect you might have something like that going on already. But I'm looking for, what do you think the trend on that's going to, is it going to continue to grow like crazy? This is certainly, younger than millennials and Gen Zs and so forth, but even as you get older, that's something that's quite desirable. It drops on the front porch.
I've always felt that since its inception, and that it was like anything else we were talking about before, that you should definitely try it and see what happens. Having said that, I don't see it as a large part of anybody's business or anybody that does it as only their business to be a huge business. But I think it is, like, one of the things that's happened across the board is that everybody in this room and consumers in general realize that they can shop for anything, any way, anyhow that they want. We're starting to call these things anything engines, because anything that you want, you can do in here. So if somebody, by word of mouth or by text or whatever, talk about purchasing things that way, I could spread like wildfire. But so I think it'll always be a piece of the way that things are purchased, going forward. But I'm not sure that it'll ever be huge.
One of the things that's interesting about the subscription services, though, like something like a BarkBox, I did a story on them a couple years ago. If a pet owner who has a subscription loses their animal and they call BarkBox to cancel the service, BarkBox will send them a condolence card and have it signed by everybody who's in the office. And conversely, if you get a new puppy and you sign up, they're sending you another card with the same sort of thing. And you get that kind of personal touch that I think creates a bond between the consumer and the company.
Can you get a new puppy if you have a problem?
I was going to say.
Yeah, there you go.
I thought he was going to say a new puppy. Then that would be a...
Related to Carol's question is the whole rental business. You can rent your furniture at IKEA or buy it, your choice. I just saw a study the other day on the Z generation, which that's the under 18. I call them the screenagers, but the reality is that the study said that 28% are buying their clothes used now, which is a similar sort of phenomena, and more and more it's not owning it. Famous article by Ted Levitt, who was a professor at Harvard, wrote Marketing Myopia. Probably some of you have read it. It's the most reprinted story ever. And he said they're not wanting to buy a product, they're wanting to hire you to do a job. If you walk into a store and say, I want a 1/4-inch drill, that's not what they really want. They want a 1/4-inch hole. And so if you can get it through a subscription or rental or used, and would used clothing business, which is growing rapidly, like Lee said, not huge, but growing, would that create more or less employment? You ever thought what that does for dry cleaners? Because all that stuff has to be cleaned before it's sent back on a subscription or rental basis.
Next question.
Hello, my name is Kishore Patel, and I had good fortune to hear Roger, you at a breakfast club, Lee at Cebus Retail event, and there is always a great takeaway from such events. I wanted to ask, of course, the challenges we hear about brick and mortar retail. Is there any example of brick and mortar retailer prominent in Columbus who is doing things out of the box which we may not have heard something interesting as a takeaway?
Oh, I actually in my notes talk about Homage. Homage is doing retro clothing, and in the restaurant business, Columbus is the maternity ward for restaurants. Okay, Pies and Pints, Piata, Bibby Bob. I mentioned the brand new one, So Plated. Has anybody been to So Plated on Lane Avenue yet? Did you like it? Yeah, it's great. And I think that we really have all kinds of, and Max and Irma's was one of those that did that. And when Jenny was talking about employees, at Max and Irma's, the most valuable thing on the balance sheet was something that was not on their balance sheet. It was their personnel manuals. And I think that we don't have to look for physical technology innovations as so much as personnel and ways of operating. And we see that with Bibby Bop and Homage, and there are probably others. I was going to ask Mark why they write about store closings instead of store openings. And the answer is,
Businesses open all the time.
yeah, and some of them are innovative and some of them aren't,
Yeah.
and nobody cares to read about a new one probably, but they do care if,
Yeah, well, if one closes, certainly that makes a big difference.
That's a big
I mean,
difference.
There's certainly, if it's a store that has been in operation for some time. I mean, if it's a place where a consumer does not go, I'm not sure that matters. But if it's a place where people are buying stuff or eating stuff that has a following, that certainly is the difference.
and in response to your question also, I wouldn't look at new products so much as techniques. Where's the logistics capital of the United States? Right here in Columbus. We have both the knowledge, the best logistics faculty, along with Tennessee and Michigan State maybe and so forth, but we also have crisscross of highways and all this sort of thing. That's why you had retailers like Abercrombie and Limited and many others be so successful, is because of their supply chain. It's much easier. If you know the theories, it's not rocket science, it's retailing science. And if you know that, you can come up with these kinds of new ways of doing business that are more efficient. And Columbus has lots of them, of course.
I have to say, I would just like to add one thing to that last question, and that is about used apparel. And I think that the fact that I have a couple of Gen Zs that live with me, and they haven't bought, their idea of going to a mall and buying a uniform, an Abercrombie uniform, a J. Crew uniform, a Gap uniform, all those things of the 90s and early aughts, that's over. So, like, I would look to somebody to sort of recreate like a Salvation Army type of experience. My daughter goes to FIT in New York City. She comes here to go to the Salvation Army in Hilliard and buy like stacks and stacks of clothing for $24. And it's from every decade, and she just pieces these looks together however she wants to. That's a world apart from what we had in the 90s or when I worked for the Limited.
Yeah, and
Stacks and stacks of
Definitely.
sacks at bargain prices.
Yeah, and certainly that's what you saw even today with the story we had in the front page of our business section about JCPenney and Macy's now incorporating thrift areas into their stores, because both of those brands have pretty well had it.
Yeah. Good
So
luck.
In fact, what you said about JCPenney is really interesting, because that's a good example of a firm that didn't understand consumer behavior theory. One of the most basic theories, well documented, hundreds of studies on it, is diffusion of innovations. There are people who are innovators, and there are people who are early adopters, and then the next group is the early majority and the late majority, and then there's laggards. And the interesting thing is, JCPenney hired a CEO from Apple who really understood how to sell to innovative people. And he came back and got good designers to redesign the whole line for JCPenney. And then what he did, he didn't realize that most of their customers, I gotta be careful here, were dowdy. And he put this new innovative line into a store of dowdy customers, and it totally failed. Now, the products were good. If he had understood how diffusion of innovation really works from straight out of the marketing textbooks, he would have known that if he'd opened up in a few key demographics, key zip codes, maybe Soho, or maybe a few upscale places and so forth, and let it diffuse through JCPenney could have been as innovative as Target, but he didn't understand the theory. There's nothing so practical as good theory.
Okay,
Is there a theory about changing their name too?
Yeah. Everybody know what JCPenney, what does C stand for? Cash. And they were the last to go to credit cards.
JCPenney's stock is at 68 cents a share. But I mean, we have other retailers that are just as bad. Is anyone here familiar with Ascena? It used to be a family of umbrella of brands.
Right. Justice,
Yeah.
Queen.
Yeah, their shares today are 28 cents. And of course, L Brands is not immune from all this. Their shares are at 10-year low. And they have reports, they report today, so we'll see how it goes. One more question, or last question, I believe, probably. I'm getting a
Hi.
high sign from Andy, yes.
I'm Stacy Kuzda, and my question is, how do organizations like Uber Eats, how is it affecting the bottom line of restaurants when they normally would have additional opportunities to upsell and add alcohol to the bills? What's happening to the restaurants with all of this mobile food that's going around?
I mean, I'll just say we're loving it. I mean, it's been great. We're developing entire menus just for that. Our new stores have a special window just for Uber Eats, Postmates, and all of them to pick up, and anybody who wants to. But we're not upselling alcohol in our stores, so I don't know how that would affect in a restaurant.
I went, excuse me, I recently went to a restaurant conference, and we had a breakout session. There must have been 60 different restaurants in this group, and every one of them was really concerned about third-party delivery. And the reason for it was taking a bit of their profits. It would, the last mile was going to their brand and not the brand of the store. So they were trying to figure out, like all the pizza places have for a century, how to do it themselves and the expense of that and the training of that. I mean, it's a major like problem right now for restaurants. And right now they're going with those third parties because they have to because of consumer demand. But sooner or later, you're going to switch to seeing them do it themselves somehow.
Yeah, we're doing that. Also, the cloud kitchen idea is really cool, where they'll open just one kitchen that can make several restaurants on an app and service
Ghost
several
kitchens,
restaurants.
they're
We're
sometimes
working
called.
with them. What's that?
Ghost kitchens, they're
Yeah.
sometimes called.
Yeah, so those are pretty neat and, I don't know, pretty fun, but we'll see where that.
I think they said it better, very well, but the margins to the restaurants don't allow for a lot of additional delivery expense. And so you're going to have to say, yes, we can deliver it, but it's going to cost you an extra $10 or $12.
Yep.
And that percentage who are willing to do there is a percentage. It's called segment, but it's not a real large one.
Okay, we're going to turn things back over to Judge Deb.
All right, thank you. I hope that everybody found today's forum very enlightening. I certainly did. We encourage you to continue the conversation with coffee and cookies back at our summer table. And thanks once again to our speakers, Roger, Lee, Jenny, and Mark, and also for our sponsors, Casto and Dispatch Company. Special thank you to all of you for being here today. We'll see you next week, but not at lunch, 5:30. Thanks again.